The bad side of Dean Martin. People don't talk about how Dean Martin was born Dino Paul Crocchetti on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio. Dean Martin's parents were Italian immigrants. Gaetano Crochet was his father and Angela Barra was his mother. Italian was the first language spoken in the Crochet home. Dino didn't speak English well until he started school. His immigrant childhood affected how he saw the world and gave him the quiet confidence he later brought to his performances. He was able to adapt and bounce back from setbacks, which made him seem at ease. Martin's early years were not at all glamorous. He dropped out of high school at 16 and worked a string of jobs that showed how tough life was in America during the Great Depression. He worked as a steel mill worker, a gas station attendant, a blackjack dealer in underground casinos, and even for a short time as an amateur boxer under the name Kid Crochet. These experiences made him stronger and gave him a street-smart outlook that would later shape his onstage character as a man who had seen life up close and chose to face it with a smile and a drink. Eventually, music led Martin to the world of show business. He used the stage name Dean Martin after singers like Bing Crosby and started singing in nightclubs and on local radio. His soft, velvety voice, which was full of warmth and emotional understatement, set him apart from other singers right once. Martin didn't sing like other singers who leaned on theatrics. Instead, he sounded like the song was a private chat, easygoing but very expressive. This trait would become his trademark. In 1946, when Martin was paired with Jerry Lewis, it was the most important moment in his career. They made one of the most famous and successful comic duos in history. Martin played the attractive straight man, and Lewis played the crazy physical comedian. From the late 1940s to the early 1950s, their partnership ruled nightclubs, radio, movies, and TV. The audience saw a perfect act, but behind the scenes, the collaboration was stressed by creative disagreements and different personalities. Many people thought Martin's career would suffer once he and Lewis broke up in 1956. Martin became a serious actor and solo entertainer when the team broke up. He shocked audiences who only knew him as a comedian when he gave a critically lauded dramatic performance in The Young Lions 1958 with Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift. This performance made Martin a real actor and gave him the chance to play a wide range of roles, from westerns like Rio Bravo 1959 to romantic comedies and dramas. His music career also did well at the same time. Dean Martin was one of the most popular recording artists of his time. He had singles that lasted for years, like That's Amore, Everybody Loves Somebody, Memories Are Made of This, and Volare. His 1964 recording of Everybody Loves Somebody famously knocked the Beatles off the top of the Billboard charts. This was a sign of Martin's lasting appeal even during the cultural revolution of the 1960s. Along with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, Martin was also a key member of the famous Rat Pack. The Rat Pack changed live entertainment in Las Vegas with acts that combined music, humor, improv, and a feeling of stylish defiance. The laid-back performer with a drink in hand that Dean Martin played in the Rat Pack became famous. Although it was sometimes mistaken for real drinking, the act was mostly for show. Martin knew how to use images to disarm both audiences and other artists. The Dean Martin Show, which ran from 1965 until 1974, may have been the best place to show off Martin's many talents. The variety program showed off his skills as a singer, comedian, and host, and it also helped him keep up the image of being the guy who made everything appear simple. His casual manner, self-deprecating humor, and seeming spontaneity hid a sharp professional instinct and a deep regard for his work. The show became a TV classic and made him even more famous. After years of carefully picking his roles, Martin made a startling and crowd-pleasing return to the big screen, if only for a short time, by appearing in two of the most over-the-top ensemble films of the early 1980s. He was part of an all-star cast in The Cannonball Run, a movie that critics quickly wrote off but that audiences loved, making it a huge hit at the box office. The movie's casual, anything-goes vibe was a wonderful match for Martin's famed calm, and he was able to glide through his sequences with the effortless charm that had defined his career for decades. After the first Cannonball Run was a big hit, he came back for Cannonball Run 2, where he reunited with a star-studded cast of Hollywood stars. This reminded viewers that even though his screen time was short, he still had unquestionable star power. Martin also quietly fell back in love with music. His soulful song, Since I Met You Baby, became a small but important hit. The song was a subtle reminder of how versatile he was, showing that his smooth, understated singing style still worked in a time when pop music was more flashy. Embracing the changing landscape of entertainment, Martin even ventured into a new medium, releasing his very first music video airing on MTV. The film showed that he was prepared to change and stay relevant in a quickly changing business, which gave the project a really personal touch. Richie, his youngest son, directed it. This made the project not just a professional milestone but also an important family cooperation that showed Martin at a time in his life when he was thinking about the past and how to express himself in new ways. Dean Martin's personal life, like his famous work, was a dramatic and intensely human narrative of love, family, and grief that lasted for decades and changed the man behind the seamless charm. People knew Martin as the smooth-voiced crooner and carefree comedian, but his marriages show a much more complicated and emotional side of his life. Martin had 3 wives, and each one was a different part of his life. He married Elizabeth Ann MacDonald on October 2, 1941, when his career was still getting off the ground. This was his first marriage. They had a family together and had 4 kids, Craig Martin, Claudia Martin, Gail Martin, and Dina Martin. These early years were full of ambition, hard work, and the stress of a growing career in entertainment. As Martin's fame grew, it became harder and harder to handle the stress on their relationship. After 8 years of marriage, the pair finally split up, and their divorce was complete in 1949. Dean Martin was married for the second time and for the longest time in September of that same year. This time with Jean Martin. This marriage would be the most important and long-lasting relationship of his life. The couple had 3 children over their 24 years together, Dean Paul Martin, Richie Martin, and Gina Martin. During this time, Martin became the most famous person in the world, taking over movies, TV, and music. Jean played a big part in keeping things stable at home. For more than 20 years, their marriage survived the stress of being famous, traveling all the time, and being watched by the public. The love lasted a long time, but it did end, and the pair got divorced on March 29, 1973. On April 25, 1973, Martin married Catherine Hahn. This was the same year. At this point, he was now a living legend, but he was still looking for happiness and friends. But the marriage didn't last long. Martin and Hahn got divorced in February 1976, less than 3 years after they got married. This was the end of Martin's last marriage. Dean Martin was the epitome of easy charm for millions of people throughout the world. The smooth crooner with the half-lidded eyes, the languid smile, and the drink constantly close by. He seemed like he wasn't worried at all, just like he did when he sang Everybody Loves Somebody. But beneath the music, the fun, and the stories about the Rat Pack was a much darker and more difficult guy. He kept his inner problems covered behind a polished public persona. Dean Martin worked hard to make people think that nothing ever really mattered. He once quipped, "I don't worry, I just don't see the point." But the people who were closest to him realized that this carefree way of thinking was more of a defense mechanism than a fact. Martin grew born poor in Steubenville, Ohio, as the son of Italian immigrants. He never entirely got over the uncertainty he felt as a child. Fame brought him money and fans, but it also made him want to run away from anything that seemed like an emotional fight even more. One of the most common fallacies about Martin was that he drank too much. He played the beloved drunk on stage and on TV perfectly, slurring his words and holding a glass as if he could hardly stand. He once said, "People think I drink all the time. If they only knew what was truly in the glass." A lot of the time, his cup had apple juice or tea in it, but alcohol was still a big part of his private life, and not necessarily in a good way. Drinking became a means to avoid dealing with sorrow, disappointment, or responsibility by keeping feelings at arm's length. This emotional remoteness was most obvious in his connections with other people. Martin had 8 kids and was married 3 times. People often said he was distant and hard to contact, though. He loved his family, but it was hard for him to show them how much he cared. He said, "I'm not good at talking about how I feel." I never was. His profession always came first, and the stress of being famous, along with his emotional distance, made it hard for him to connect with the people who meant the most to him. Dean Martin's son, Dean Paul Martin, died in a plane disaster in 1987. This may have been the worst time in Dean Martin's life. He was heartbroken by the loss. Friends saw a shift right away that will last forever. The fun faded, the shine faded, and the need to perform almost completely went away. Martin remarked softly, "You don't get over something like that. You just have to deal with it." He never truly did. He pulled back even more, hardly ever going out in public and giving up the showman character that had once defined him. His long association with Frank Sinatra also showed another dark part of Martin's personality. He tended to back down instead of face problems head-on. Sinatra loved being in charge, fighting, and being intense, but Martin hated conflict. When the Rat Pack had problems, Martin typically decided to stay quiet instead of trying to fix them. He answered, "I don't fight. I walk away." That tendency made him emotionally alone over time, even though he was surrounded by people. Dean Martin was tired of the image that had made him famous near the end of his life. The funny, singing, and smiling performer had become a mask that he no longer had the energy to wear. He once said that people thought I had it easy. They can only see what I want them to see. There was a man behind the scenes who avoided pain instead of healing it, buried anguish instead of sharing it, and paid a high price for being emotionally distant for a long time. Dean Martin will always be remembered as a famous person, a voice, a face, and a symbol of a dazzling time. But the truth is much more human and much sadder. His dark side wasn't being mean or causing trouble, it was suffering in silence, grieving in silence, and always having trouble letting others really know him. In his last years, Martin was very serious, which was very different from the loud, confident figure he had been on stage and cinema for decades. He had been a heavy smoker for most of his life, and in September 1993, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center told him he had lung cancer. This news marked the start of the last chapter of his life. Doctors informed him that surgery might give him more time. But Martin, who had always been fiercely independent in both his personal and professional life, said no to the procedure. Not only was he tired after a long life in the public eye, but he also accepted his fate on his own terms. In early 1995, Martin stopped being in the public eye as his health got worse. He left behind the applause, camera flashes, and glitzy nightlife that had once been his natural environment. Fans who had grown up with his music, movies, and iconic status in entertainment history really missed him. The man who used to be effortlessly stylish and charming now lived quietly, surrounded by memories of a career that had a lasting impact on popular culture. Martin passed away at his home in Beverly Hills on Christmas Day 1995, when he was 78 years old. The cause was abrupt respiratory failure caused by emphysema, which was a harsh effect of the lifestyle he had had for most of his life. The news of his death spread well beyond Hollywood. The lights on the Las Vegas Strip were turned off in his honor, which was an unusual and moving gesture. A symbolic gesture that honored not just a performer, but also a legend whose presence was a big part of the city's identity and soul. Martin was buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, where many other famous people from movies and music are also buried. His grave has an epitaph that wonderfully sums up both his legacy and the deep connection he had with his fans. At some point, everyone loves someone. The first lyric of his most famous song. Those simple statements are what make him so popular. A reminder that Dean Martin was and still is deeply loved long after the show ended and the lights went off.